So I'd like my panelists to please join me here today, and we'll kick this discussion right off. Welcome everyone. This is an exciting event. Very pleased to be here and chat a little bit. I'm currently involved in a cross-border venture fund, startup fund. We are working both in China and in the United States. The theory is this: if you can succeed in these two markets, you will win. And we're out building winners of companies. That's what I'm up to today. So today, there we go. Back with you. We're talking about an exciting area, and I get the opportunity to speak about money today. And I think it's one that we all like to talk about. And so if the panelists would please join me, we will get started. So as they're acquainting themselves, and I'll have them introduce themselves, since they'll do a far better job of that than I will. How many of you have digital wallets? Show of hands. Okay, maybe 20%, 30%? How many of you have been involved in an ICO and will admit to it? Okay. How many of you have a friend, just a friend, who's been involved in an ICO? Okay, now we're starting to reach about 50% of the room. So in general, we do know people who have done this kind of thing. But you know, I just want to share some statistics with you before the panelists start talking today. In 2017, please, there were 435 ICOs launched. $5.6 billion was raised. This next year, in the Cambridge, New England area, $9 billion in venture capital will go out. So $5.6 billion in 2017 was raised in ICOs. The average raise was $12.7 million. Sizable amount of money going into these ICOs. And the average return was 12.8 times to investors. So pretty significant numbers. Now averages can tilt things, so I ask you, peel it back a little bit, but still very impressive. In the first quarter of 2018, $6.5 billion was raised, and more than 200 ICOs were launched. Meanwhile, they've been outlawed in China, for example. So there's big parts of the world that's not happening in yet. But nevertheless, over $6 billion in the first quarter of the year, 100% growth in number of transactions. So I'm going to turn it over to my panel, since they are a very distinguished group, and we'll start just to my left, and ask each of them to introduce themselves and tell you how they're involved with ICOs today. Go ahead.
Okay, thanks everyone, and thanks for having me here. My name is Greg, and currently I'm an analyst in the National Center for the Finance Research at Beijing University. It is an institution focused on the new finance research in China, especially in fintech and blockchain applications. And at the same time, I also worked as senior investors and consultants on several startups in the blockchains. We talk about but mainly all these startups also mainly focus on the exchange part. So I think that's probably, before I joined the national centers, I used to work in the traditional finance industries like commercial banks, investment banking, PE/VC for most about 10 years. So if you guys have any questions about project financing and corporate financing in China right now, please feel free to talk to me. And once again, thanks for having me here. Thanks.
Thank you, Greg.
Hi everyone, David Fragale. I am the co-founder of a company called Autonomy. The company is based in Seattle. I live here in Cambridge. And I got into the blockchain space back in probably 2014 here at MIT doing graduate school work, where the MIT Bitcoin Club was established, and a lot of people running around the MIT campus, buying Bitcoin. The MIT school actually provided 100 Bitcoin to each of the undergrad students that year. So there was a lot of early activity there that just caught my eye and started to dive into it. And after that, in 2015, worked in, I would call it more the enterprise space. So I worked as a blockchain representative at PwC, helping to take blockchain to some of the Fortune 500 companies, 100 companies back in 2015, which was very, very early, and I think it was more of a conversation, and did some cool work with the international development community, patenting a blockchain solution for international aid and funds governance in 2016, and then in 2016 also worked with the US government around looking at some national security issues with cryptocurrency, and helped inform and advise around some work where they were finding crypto keys coming back from the battlefield as they were doing ISIS raids. So did some work there, so I would call it blockchain for good and also the dark side of crypto. And then after that, wanted to dive into where the action was, which was early stage. So in 2017, through a VC based here, started Autonomy, which is a spin out of an IoT security company in Seattle. We took the parent company's core pieces of IP, plugged it into the blockchain, and developed a concept which was focused on securing the Internet of Things using blockchain. So that's what we're doing. We completed our token sale. I'll call it a token sale instead of the previous acronyms because of just legal reasons. So we call it a token sale. We completed that here in the U.S. In May-June timeframe. Raised $25 million. We're way oversubscribed, but that was the period of time that we were in, kind of doing our raise through January and February. And that's Autonomy, and I'm happy to talk more about that as we go.
Hi, my name is Dennis, and I'm a co-founder of Vitadata, and I'll also have my co-founders here with us. So Vitadata is a data sharing platform which helps the medical research teams to solve the patient recruitment bottleneck issue. I think I heard the speech by Nicholas White. And I think we're having to share the common vision about how blockchain technology can help with patient recruitment and data collection in the healthcare industries. And right now, we are in the early stage and having working demos around it. And I also believe that Vitadata probably the first healthcare application project with stablecoins mechanism. So that being said, I can talk more if you're interested, but basically the token play an indispensable role in the architect and business solutions and to help grow the ecosystem organically.
Hi guys, my name is Bing. I'm from 30K. So I graduated from Yale back to 2015, and then after that I went to State Street, which is the headquartered in Boston. It's an asset management firm. And then I worked there for 2 years. After that, I joined 30K. So that's it about me. So for 30K, we are a smart contract and blockchain verification platform, which is founded by top professors in Yale and Columbia University. And our mission is to mathematically prove that the blockchain and smart contract platform, or the smart contract and the DApps are bug-free. And our features include it's a specialized decomposition process by breaking down complex and hard to solve problems into small pieces and easy to solve problems. And then we compose them and combine them into an integrated one for end-to-end guarantees. And right now our investors include Let's Be China and Danhua and Matrix Partners China. And our partners include Binance, Coupon, Gate, and some other exchange. Yeah, that's it.
Very cool. Thank you. Hey, David, I have a question for you since you kind of started walking down the road there talking about coin sale and whatever. How do you combine that with conventional venture capital, and how do your venture capitalists feel about this? And what's this mean for your company?
Yeah, I definitely think this is a topic that is not explored enough. which is this new mechanism for financing, and how does that relate to the conventional method. And in my experience, I was really interested in doing the ICO for one reason, which was kind of that, call it the idealistic view of democratization of capital, and we're going to create this new capital formation mechanism that will cross all borders. So I had a very pie-in-the-sky idealistic view when I first started, and we, as I mentioned, did what now is called, I guess, a reverse ICO, which is a company that's established that does an ICO, right? So we had this venture-backed company in Seattle. They had roughly 30 million in equity financing to date. So we, when we looked at that and we did an ICO, the existing VC, I think, sees that as an opportunity, is that now we can almost amplify and create a bigger company with an existing equity stake in a company that almost gets replicated in some cases, depending on how you design a corporate structure. So I think some VCs see an opportunity there, and I think that's a progressive VC view. Other VCs, I think, now see this as kind of a threat. This is the coming wave of how we will no longer be, in business in the future. And I think it's somewhere in the middle where I think we're going to land. And I think there's some, one particular VC here in Boston, Pillar VC, Jamie Goldstein, has a really strong Medium post that he put out back in, I would say it was late fall last year, where he has, I think, a very progressive view on, the convertibility option between, equity to tokens. So how can we meet somewhere in the middle and get creative? And I think that's a really innovative perspective, and that's a step forward for the VC community. And I think, at the end of the day, the VC community is still going to have a role. They're still there. And when I went through that with the pie-in-the-sky view, I guess what I left with was, I still feel like we tried to build a decentralized, try to raise money for a decentralized technology, but we still ended up going through the very centralized process, meaning that the initial pitches that we were giving were still to the VCs. We're still to Sand Hill Road. All the VCs were still getting an early view. They were getting access to the intelligence that was coming, with the next company. And then we were pitching it. So I still think, then we pitched it to the crowd, right? And I think the crowd very quickly got involved, and I think that was great. But I still think we're dealing with a very centralized process where the early returns, the access to returns are still in the hands of the centralized few, right? And I think that's something that we should all be talking a little bit more about. I appreciate the question. I think it's one we should all explore.
Cool. Jim, how about you? You mentioned that you've got conventional venture capital in your business. Can you comment on their thoughts on ICOs or anything like that, or maybe more? Maybe you want to look, one person removed from this, but what are your thoughts?
Well, 30K is fairly conservative on ICO before legal issues both in China and in the US. But previously we received some token investments from other investors. We still believe in token economy and the token funds, but right now I think it's not well known that it's in the market is not good, right? So it may not be a good time to do ICO at this moment. And we believe that if a firm have a very solid background and founded by very important figures, I think all the companies, such companies can suffer from this bear market, and then firm will rise later in the years.
Thank you. Greg or Dennis, can you comment?
I think for ICO purposes, it really depends on your capital need, right? So if you can go through the capital raising, through private sales of tokens, probably you don't have to go through ICO per se, because you're going to face a lot of public relationship management, and you're going to have a lot of complaints if your account drops and your official Twitter. Everybody knows that. So I think it's one of the things is because the token is critical to the business model in general, but doesn't mean that, which is about the utility perspective or the attributes of the token itself. But everybody using it also as an investment vehicle, regardless if you admit it or not, right? So really, it's like if you have a mechanism that kind of differentiate that from your utility use of that purpose. Essentially, it's like is your project well thought through in terms of designing how the mechanism to get rid of that excess volatility due to the trading in the exchanges. So if you can manage that pretty well, I believe that the token would be a much better position to be better understood by the public, by the regulators, and so that to have a fair, or put it that way, a fair position to make more benefits or benefit the project itself. Yeah.
Got it. Greg?
Yes, totally agree. And just one thing I have to share is we've done several kind of ICO things or discussions before. So when companies decided to go this path, we probably will ask them to give a full plan. What you're gonna do when you after you launch your token. But the thing is for the very beginning, so when we launch the ICOs, the majority of the tokens held by the company or by the funders. And you have to make the people or make the investor believe the value of the token. That's quite a long way to go. So probably you need what we call is after sales service team to keep communicating with the investor, to keep communicating with the whole market, to what you want to do and what's the kind of progress of your technology. And also, so we talk about the blockchains. One of the blockchain technology, I think, is the transparency, and also you have this kind of the information disclosures to the whole market. But this is the expense and also it's the cost currently you have to bear when you launch the ICOs. Thank you.
I think that's a very valuable reminder. There's certainly requirements to keep your investors informed and things that we all do in any point of investment. So good point. I'm going to ask just one more question here, and then we'll open it up to all of you. I'm sure you've got some questions. So if you've got them, start coming up with them, figure them out, and we'll get to them in just a moment. So guys, where are you getting your information on ICOs? Where do you go to for trusted advice on this? It's wild, wild west out there to some degree. How do you know you're getting advice that you can rely upon? Is that through your board members? Is that through outside advisors, investment bankers? Let's just like to hear your thoughts on that. Anyone jump in?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I get this question a lot about, what book should I read if I'm new to blockchain or crypto, right? And I guess my response is, first I'm confused. I'm like, wait, I haven't read this book. And I think what's really important to note is that we're so early with this, and I think everyone here maybe comes into a conference and says, wow, I'm way behind because you're in this little microcosm and we're all talking to each other in a vacuum. But we're so early with this that the books will be written about us. And I think that's really important to note, is that you can now write a chapter in that book that will be written a year or 2 years from now. And that's different than I think most cases, or at least the way that a lot of us have approached kind of going to work every day. And I guess where that leaves me is, I've found that, coming out of the MIT ecosystem, I thought was an incredible opportunity. But where I found a lot of opportunity was just being in the community and going to meetups here in Boston, which have been tremendous for me just to build a network locally. And I think that network is really strong because what's unique about Boston is that, and when I go to Seattle or San Francisco or Seoul, is that there's a diverse set of talent and a lot of those ingredients, whether it's the VC or the academic perspective or engineering or the hardware perspective or the business side of things, all of that has to come together. And I think if you go to those forums, you find the opportunities to not just observe and read about something at Coindesk.com, but actually get out and act and participate and get involved. You learn so much more, and you can actually start to write that next page in the book. And I think that's really important. So I would say, what I do is, if there is an online resource, I go to, mostly Reddit, where I stay involved in Telegram, and I get to know people, and then you just have a conversation and you learn through action. So that's what I would say, is more action-oriented learning.
Good. Anybody else?
I would say very, very comprehensive summary of everything. But I do agree. I just want to emphasize, meetups is a great place. Offline networking, online reading is a good habit to collect all the information, but really collecting the dots, you need face-to-face like a discussion, and maybe argue in a constructive way, and what is probably a good way or not. Because I don't believe there's only one way to do things, but it's just which one is better, or more in compliance with the regulatory guidance, whatever. So, I mean, the whole regulatory dynamics is very viral, and like you have to keep up with what's going on right now. So, definitely talk to advisors, like VC type institutional investors, or lawyers, right? So, just to stay alert on what's going to happen down the road. So, that's what is my comment.
I would say to have a very clear idea of ICO or the best news from ICO, definitely reach out to your investors or clients, because investors, they are investing in a lot of companies like you, right? So definitely they will have more resources and more news than other your peers. And then on the downstream side, definitely contact with your clients, because they are also in the market, so they can share some more useful information. Be also be very keen on the conferences and events like hosted by some big figures. That will also be very helpful.
So, looking at the information that I had about tokens from the WeChat and also other Telegram things, because when we do the research in China, like how many people come to purchase ICOs or tokens, most of them believe they have inside information. So you ask them like where you get the inside information. Is that like from the kind of media, social media, and also about this WeChat things and Telegram things? Because I think it's quite interesting because all these companies, all the founders who launched ICOs, they were eager to keep their investors in the loop. They see everything. Most of them, I mean, just laughing, but you can tell. But the thing is like they have this responsibility, or they have the interest to keep the value of their token. So I think they're probably quite different from what happened in China and what happened outside of China. But if you guys also purchase some like tokens from the China group, like probably ask them to put you in the one of their investors' WeChat group. That's definitely the easy way for you to keep posted. Thank you.
Great, thank you all. How about some questions from our great audience today? Who's first? Steve, right? Manny, sorry.
Thank you. I appreciate the candid comments. I think they're very insightful. So, like, how do we overcome the stigma in the industry that there's Bitcoin and everything else is shitcoin? And I'm not talking about Ethereum. That's a little joke. Anyway, but I am. But anyway, how do we overcome that in all seriousness? Because I think that's the problem, right? Even just kind of saying the word ICO or SDO, people kind of step back a bit, and hair on their necks, stands up, and they think we're thinking about, DAO or Munchie or, these really abusive, fraudulent schemes. But, that's just one side of it that we all know. So we never hear about the successful token offerings. We only hear about the ones that go bad, because people never complain when they make money. You notice that? People, even if they're in a bad investment, they only complain when they lose money. So how do we overcome that as a community?
I would give a step.
All right, first I think we should stop using the words of shitcoins in general. So everything is a shitcoin, including Bitcoin, so until the application is actually landed. So when you keep your promise, turn your promise into reality, until then everything is pretty much, you cannot, it basically is about what you claim to do and what you can do. And just to keep your promises. That's not something, there's teams like, do a runway from the project, but really, if you have I met investors. The investor first thing asking me is like, are you married? Do you have kids? Where's your family? Where is stuff? It's like, not really related to the project, right? Yeah, I just make sure you are going to have no chance of a runway. But so okay, makes sense. I have nowhere to go, and my kids are here as a hostage, all right? So yeah, so that's the kind of so I read about the team, the people, like you are investing in people instead of a project, because the people and the team will eventually the one who turn the project into reality. So the tokens is the part which is keep the project or system organically grow. So that's also important. But I just try not to emphasize too much on the investment properties of the token itself, but just on terms of the utility parts. So that's why I think the long-term token holders going to benefit from it. All right.
I think this is a good question. I mean, Manny, I think the whole difference between Bitcoin and everything else and the point of views that fall there. There are a couple dynamics I think at play. I think you have one, we're all kind of talking to each other with varying degrees of knowledge on this, and we're all viewing things with one perspective, trying to talk to someone with another perspective, and I think we're talking over each other all the time, and then arguments come out of that, and then people leave with a misguided point of view, and then that cycles back in, right? And then it turns into massive arguments. And I think with Bitcoin, there was a group, a very core group of folks that were dedicated to Bitcoin really early, got invested. That was the secret society, so to speak. And then now everyone else is involved in their secret society, and it's no longer a secret. And I think that people feel threatened by that. They wanted it to be something cool, but they wanted it to be big, but now that it's getting big, everyone's like, oh geez, now everybody knows about my club. And I think that's some just personal reactions that I think I've seen where, that's becoming in, a defensive position against everything else. But I do think what I would separate it as Bitcoin, as its original design, medium of exchange, it does what it does, very well, even though it's being used as more of a store of value. It performs well, and it's the best evidence that we have that a blockchain, has some element of pure security to it since it's been around almost 10 years and hasn't been, quote unquote hacked, at least the core blockchain. And I think what we see now with everything else, Ethereum and everything, is more a movement towards other things, applications, the democratization of raising capital, the fact that you can develop smart contracts that can program that money. So I think there's many new things that are coming out in the oh shitcoin category that are part of the process that we go through every time that there is an innovation cycle. And there's a bubble, and I guarantee there's a bubble with a lot of this. I think everyone can get on that side, but that's what we saw with the tech, boom in the 90s. A lot of winners and many more losers. But I think we're going to see the same thing. And that'll play itself out. But I think it's just this moment in time, the perspective we all have at this moment in time, that if you're looking at long term, you're making the argument, that this is something that will fail. Clearly, things will fail. But if you're looking at things will be successful, and you're going to be one of the ones that are going to be successful, sure, you're going to have an optimistic view. So again, I just think it's a matter of perspective. But at the end of the day, I don't think what we're going through right now is anything new than we've ever been through with any innovation cycle.
Well said. Beth?
Thank you for the insight. So a few of you guys talk about how there's this dynamic between traditional VC and token investors. So curious, if you could give a few examples of how the deals are structured, both in the case where, say, it's a new project and if we either fully VC, fully just token, or somewhere in the middle, or if it's a company that has been existing already and they're thinking about, or with VC investor, and then they're thinking about a token of sale. What kind of deal structure and what specific mechanism is used in those type of situations?
Okay, so the question is, can VC and tokens and ICOs coexist? And how are deals being structured in companies to make that happen? Who wants to jump in?
I'll go ahead. So, I personally think ICO is just it's not evil as it sounds or as it looks. So ICO is typically another way of raising value, right, compared to traditional VC. And many people are liking VC is because venture capital can sometimes generate rather high returns. Just like if you invest in Facebook or DD in China, you can generate 100+ returns on your money. So if people believe, some people believe that things could happen in ICO, it's definitely true. But think about the case that if you keep your eyes closed and then just invest your money to all the companies you can reach, you definitely lose money, right? So it's not good to invest blindly. But on the other hand, if you invest money sharply, and then you are investing your money into some high-tech companies, and you truly believe their technology, definitely you will have a good return in the future, including ICO. And with regards to whether they can coexist, I would say that some companies now are accepting both ICO or token investment and traditional money investment. And it's definitely, there are some room that both of them can coexist.
Do you see it in any cases where VCs look at this as an opportunity to lever up a little bit with their portfolio companies, much as they did with venture debt and things like that in the past?
Thanks. It's quite a good question, and also from the VC perspectives. So when I invest in these companies, then we're going to go through all the assets this company have, and some of them we think is quite good for the ICO target, and some of them we're going to keep it in the inside of the company. But it's truly, I think it's the ICO thing is truly help the VC to also one of the way to generate the extra interest and also to share the risk. For example, is we have this kind of target companies we were quite interested, but besides there's two kind of the asset. One is generate the positive cash flow, another is not. So for from our perspective, so we developed these two companies. We kind of split the companies. With the positive cash flow, the one with the positive cash flows, we ask them to go launch ICOs, but the other costs would remain in the company. The reason why we do that is like before the 2016, we still can do the ICOs without any positive cash flows. But after that, I mean, the whole customers, the whole market has been well educated. So so if you go with the ICO choice, but without positive cash flows, it's truly it's how do we say, like mission impossible. So that the things you have to consider. And from the VC perspectives, you do have to know that you're not PE, you're not pre-IPO. So if you love the company and you put your money in the this kind of startups, you have to go along with them. And any financing instrument available in the market, you have to give a try. Because for the VC type of the startups, the first priority is like you're gonna survive, and then you grow. Thanks.
I'll just add one more point is, while the VCs I do think see this as, an opportunity, as most of the time, that's their business model, is seeing opportunities, and I think they do see this as opportunities to launch ICOs, whether it's from an existing company or taking a new company through the process. But I will say that it comes with a cost. It's very costly, and I think what we experienced going through this, it was a 10-month process, especially just because we launched it here in the U.S., which meant that we had to follow the letter of the law as much as we could. And I think what that meant was that's high 6-figure, 7-figure investment that you have to make. And when we actually did what I call it a token sale, it's not so much just the regulatory terminology, that's semantics, but it's because with our platform, we had to actually build the platform to the point of ICO, not just raise a white paper, throw it out there and say, we're going to build this, we're raising funds. We're not raising funds, we're actually selling a product. Our platform is ready to go. Our token is available and people can register devices on our network. We can track the reputation of that device. Everything that our white paper says it was going to do, we built in the matter of 10 months, and that's costly. And the VC financed that. So we would not have had any financing to do that. Otherwise, we could have taken maybe private funds to do that, but just due to the regulatory environment here, we had to keep everything that we raised from a private sale on ice, protect it, quarantine it off, not spend a dime, and then at the point of sale, then we actually had everything generated with a token. So I think what the VCs are learning is that it's more costly than originally laid out to do an ICO, especially here in the US, absolutely here in the US, very expensive. And I'm seeing a lot of the companies that I'm friends with and I'm helping go through this process, they're seeking out VC funding for more seed funding to get through an ICO. And that's, it's getting more and more expensive, and I think your numbers were great you gave at the beginning to set the stage. And I was looking at CoinDesk, they have a great tracker, the ICO tracker. I think it's 20 billion with a B has been raised to date as of, I think, July is where they last update that number. 20 billion has been raised through an ICO. In June of this year, we saw almost 6 billion of that in 1 month. And then after that in July, that's when if you track Ethereum, the price of Ethereum tanked, we saw about 500 million compared to the 6 billion the month before. So it's dropped, but I think a lot of this is dependent upon, there's a strong correlation with the price of Ethereum. If the price of Ethereum and gets above 600 or 700, I think that's where we start to see more flow of capital into ICOs. But right now, it's a really different environment when you go to the conferences and you see pitches. But I think VCs see that as opportunity to find the best projects, invest in them through a seed, and then as Ethereum rebounds, they're going to be in a great position. So that's what I see. So while the traditional crypto funds are maybe cowering and hiding and dealing with their liquidity issues and losses, the VCs are there now, and they're out at the conferences. And I think if you're a founder, view that as an opportunity. And if you're a VC, that's what your peers are doing. That's just from perspective from the field.
Great insight from both sides there. Utilizing VCs for early stage financing, getting that product up and running, getting your structure built, and investing so that you can get an ICO out there and successful. Good strategy there. Great question. Stephen?
Thanks, Stacey. David, you were talking about this traditional Sand Hill Road structure that you had to go through and you had. And what strikes me interesting is that U.S. is quite unique. It's one of the few places that already has a very built-out structure that VC can be considered a traditional industry. I'm wondering, when you guys think about markets that aren't as developed when it comes to venture capital, do you think that VC will enter with the same strength as it entered in the U.S., or will we see a leapfrog to a token-based fund?
Yeah, I think what gets me excited about blockchain and crypto is not looking at it through a U.S.-centric view. And I think if you look at this from a world view, we can now provide capital access, whether it's formation all the way through remittances, and digital identities, and all the great use cases that come from this technology. I think that we're challenging that norm, and we will not see, just because of the advent of blockchain, whether this crypto blockchain bubble bursts and it disappears, which I don't believe it will, but some people are taking that view. I think what we're going to be left with is a remodeling of the VC industry. And we're now going to see when VC plays a role in other areas and markets of the world, we're going to see a new model take form. And that will challenge the US VC model, the Sand Hill Road model. And I think that's exciting. So, but I think we're going through this cyclical ups and downs right now where, the original investments so there's going to be some losers and that's going to play a role. But at the end of the day, I think that what's really compelling to the folks that are truly invested in blockchain and they're not just looking at their blockfolio and saying, I'm done with this, and they're out because of speculation. The true believers in the technology are invested personally, passionately, and from a professional standpoint in that future in which capital will have no words. And that's exciting. That should be exciting for everyone. So that's my just perspective on it, but I do think that the thing will be time, and I think what we're seeing particularly in Asia, is fantastic in terms of the embracing. When I was in Seoul for Blockchain Week about 2 months ago, it was just incredible to see. It's incredible. And I think that we're seeing different models form. VC doesn't have to look like VC on Sand Hill Road everywhere.
How about right here?
Okay, so for those of us who are not knowledgeable about this area, could somebody comment on the legal structure of ICOs and how are tokens tied to the value of the company? What happens if the company does traditional fundraising and it gets acquired? What's the typical legal structure?
Hey, Manny, would you mind commenting on this? Then we'll toss it back to the panel, but I know this might be, it might be working a little overtime here, but
there are, as was mentioned earlier, right? So there are right now, there's been variations in terms of how the ICO actually comes to the market. So there's a project, there's a white paper which is akin to a prospectus. A project is looking to raise money, they have a sale, they have a target, how much you want to raise, they have a pre-sale. There's been an evolution in terms of how you actually issue the token. In the US, there was something called a SAFT, which is deemed a little controversial now. It was very popular about 2 years ago. So most of the ICOs, there's not one STO yet that I'm aware of, but they usually come to market via a Regulation D506, so like a private offering vehicle limited to accredited investors. There also could be a Reg A Plus. So as was mentioned earlier, there is a regime and there are roadmaps in terms of how to actually move forward with these. But as the regulators have kind of what I'll call rulemaking by enforcement, they look at, the question is, okay, I want to do a utility token or a securities token. The chairman of the SEC said he's not seen a project that is a utility token, that's not a securities token. What that means is that you have to look at something called the Howey test, and it goes back to an Orange Grove case that's very old. And it has questions that you need to, threshold questions that you need to answer that provide indicia of whether something is a security. If the answer is a security, then you have to look at, okay, how do we actually do this issuance of a security? And right now, what's being used is these vehicles that exist via a private placement type offering. With that being said, that's in the US. There is a tremendous amount of what I'll call jurisdiction shopping. So there are foreign jurisdictions that are very small countries that have very pro-crypto or ICO legislation. In particular, Malta, Gibraltar. These are areas that, unfortunately, are money laundering havens, and they've come up with an alternative way because of masking transactions and whatnot. But because they're small countries, they don't have the tension we have here with federal and state regulation, right? So they're able to kind of quickly put in place some regulatory regime that would promote and stimulate doing an ICO in that country. So if you do the ICO, you're a US company, you do an ICO in Malta, you have to limit yourself who your investors are. So now you're getting into, can I get US investors or foreign investors? The question is, now we do that ICO, if it's done pursuant to a private offering, there's a seasoning or a lockup period, which is 12 months. So it's really difficult to see a secondary market in these if they're done that way. Other ICOs that go through, like Malta, for example, they'll get listed on Binance. And they get listed on these foreign exchanges, which is also very controversial, how they actually come to market.
So, and in those documents, it's specified what happens if the company does a conventional financing, if they get acquired. What rights do the token holders have?
That's a great question. The white papers pretty much follow a pro forma template in terms of white papers that have worked in the past. People just kind of uses the template and regurgitate and use them in the future if they were deemed successful white papers. It unfortunately doesn't get into that level of specificity. So what I'm working on is something called the IGF with Miko Matsumura, which is the ICO Governance Foundation. And Miko has created a registry, so it's on the blockchain. So it's ICOs that want to kind of say, hey, we'll show you that we're good people. They put the white paper on the blockchain, on the registry, and then any other changes they'll update to that registry. So they're holding themselves out, kind of as a corollary to my question before, is like, we're good guys, we're good ICOs. If that doesn't exist, it's akin to an EDGAR for an SEC publicly traded company. But that's the conundrum, is that The white paper is not a prospectus. So if you do a private offering, you have offering memorandum, which covers you under the Securities Act. But it's a problem that these white papers, there's people who write white papers and they're missing a lot of information.
I think maybe the question too is what happens when it hits the fan? What are the rights of the holders?
So now you're getting into legal advice. So now, my rate.
Yeah, well, I don't want to feel
Start the clock ticking. I'll have to answer the 6-minute interval. I'm just kidding.
I felt he was.
But no, essentially, there's lawyers that are class action lawyers now that are suing projects. So I know a lawyer, David Silver. He's in Florida. He's a successful attorney, and he's very aggressive, and he's good at what he does. So they target projects that go bad, and they're pretty successful in their actions. I mean, so you don't even have to wait for an SEC action, enforcement action. They target these ICOs, and the investors in the ICOs get screwed over. They're violative of the Securities Acts because the issuance did not comport with that. So it's pretty easy to kind of prosecute these guys. But yeah, there are a bunch of lawyers now that will represent you in addition to going to the regulatory agencies. So you could go to FINRA, you could go to the SEC, or you go to the states. I mean, if you look at New York has a very aggressive financial regulator, Division of Financial Services. So those guys actually, the CFTC came out with a modified banking license 2 weeks ago. So if you want to, it's essentially a fintech license. New York is so aggressive. The head of the Division of Financial Services in New York sued the OCC, sorry, not CFTC, the OCC. The head of Division of Financial Services in New York brought an action against the OCC for bringing out a fintech license because New York wants to keep their jurisdiction.
Interesting. So it's clear there's major expense involved in launching an ICO. There's regulation that's creeping in and varies from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. So you can shop your jurisdiction and things like that. It sounds like some of that's going on. Where do we think this is going? David, you spoke about being proud of the fact that this leads to democratization of investment. Is that only going to exist until this becomes a very regulated area, or do you think that this continues in the future?
I think it continues, but I think you always have that tug of war between innovation and regulation, right? That'll always exist, and I think that's healthy. And I think what we're going to see is the regulatory frameworks evolve. Whether that's evolving through just better specificity and clarity around the existing framework and how that applies with this, or we start to see some adjustments made in the framework that allow for an accommodation to this new capital formation mechanism. But at the end of the day, I think the conversation about rights and tokens and the quote-unquote investor or the purchaser of that token, however we want to categorize them, I still think that they absolutely have to be protected. If you're classifying this as a fundraising process, those same protections that exist for current investors, if we're going to broaden the framework to allow for this technology to enable cross-border capital formation, then everyone needs to be protected with the same rights. And I think that's something that will likely take place. But unfortunately, I think the way that my understanding is, after spending a lot of time with various different perspectives on this very broad legal spectrum around this regulatory reality that we're in, is that the existing regulatory framework bodies will likely not be proactive and issue a statement about here's the updated framework, right? What will happen likely is, as Manny mentioned, David Silver and a lot of the class action lawsuits, during this trough that we're in right now, where a lot of quote-unquote investors or purchasers of tokens have lost a lot of money, there will be class action lawsuits that will make their way through the courts. The courts will then make some sort of determination, and then once the determination has been made, that then enforcement will happen through the SEC. So they're more of an enforcement mechanism when I look at the SEC. And they're going to enforce what the case law and the courts have determined. I think we're seeing that. So that, unfortunately, with that takes time, and that takes years to work through the process to get there. And I think the real question is, the answer is yes, I think we're going to see this technology exist for the future for capital formation. However, I think we're going to see a lot of really interesting time here for the next year or two around how do we get to a framework that actually makes sense that will support that.
Great. Anything else from the floor? Please.
Yeah, so can I ask a quick question? So when we talk, yeah. Thanks. So when we talk about ICOs, definitely it's going to the secondary market, and for every secondary market, there will be traders and people with deep market who want to make money by short your coins and then rebuy it when it becomes cheap. So in terms of projects, how do you navigate that? How do you ensure? Because like the general public doesn't know who is doing that, and they will definitely target that to you, right? And how do you facing that sort of risk? And are there any things that you can do to kind of fight against that, or try to protect yourself, I guess? That's clear.
If I understand correctly, the question is asked like how to navigate ICO market,
Yeah.
make a profit. Is that a question?
Yeah.
And I
So
think specifically, how do you weather the ups and downs, the market activity, and